The rain fell hard against the cracked streets, turning the narrow roads into shining rivers of grass-white water. Thunder rolled across the sky, deep and heavy, like a warning no one could escape. The wind howled through broken buildings and flickering streetlights, making the night feel colder than it already was. Most people had already rushed home, hiding from the storm. Shops were closing. Doors were locked. Curtains were drawn. But not everyone had somewhere safe to go. A young woman stepped out from a small roadside cafe, pulling her thin shawl tightly around her shoulders. Her name was Aisha. Her clothes were damp, her shoes worn out, and her face showed the weight of a long, tiring day. She paused under the weak shelter of the cafe's roof, watching the rain pour down like it had no intention of stopping. Aisha let out a slow breath. Her body ached from standing all day. Her hands still smelled faintly of tea and dish soap. The cafe owner had shouted at her again that evening, something about slow service, even though she had barely stopped moving all day. But that wasn't what troubled her the most. Her mind drifted to the small room she called home. The unpaid rent. The landlord's angry warnings. And worst of all, her mother, lying on a weak bed, coughing through the night, growing sicker with each passing day. Aisha swallowed hard. She had counted her money before leaving work. It wasn't enough. Not for the rent. Not for medicine. Not even for proper food. For a moment, she closed her eyes, letting the sound of rain fill the silence inside her. Then, gathering what little strength she had left, she stepped out into the storm. The cold rain hit her instantly, soaking her hair and clothes within seconds. She walked quickly, her head slightly lowered, trying to shield herself from the wind. People passed by her in a hurry, some holding umbrellas, others running to their cars. No one looked at anyone. Everyone was focused on escaping the rain. That's when she saw him. At the corner of the street, near a broken wall, a man sat on the ground. He was hunched over, his thin body shaking slightly. His clothes were torn and completely soaked. Rainwater dripped from his hair, running down his face like silent tears. He didn't move. He didn't call for help. He just sat there, alone. Aisha slowed her steps. For a second, she thought maybe she was mistaken. But no, he was real. And no one was stopping. A man walked past him, glancing for only a moment before looking away. Two young boys laughed quietly as they hurried by, whispering something and shaking their heads. A woman pulled her child closer, as if the man was something to be feared. And still, no one stopped. Aisha felt something twist inside her chest. She took a small step forward, then stopped. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her shawl. She looked down at her own clothes, already soaked. At her hands, trembling from the cold. At the small bag she carried, the one that held all the money she had left. "It's not your problem," a voice inside her whispered. "You can't even help yourself." She looked at the man again. He hadn't moved. For a moment, he lifted his face slightly. Their eyes almost met, but not quite. His expression was empty, tired, as if he had already stopped expecting anything from the world. Aisha's heart ached. She turned her head, ready to walk away. Her steps moved forward. 1, 2. Then she stopped. The rain grew louder, as if the world itself was waiting. A deep breath filled her lungs. Slowly, she turned back. Her eyes settled on the man again, but this time, something had changed. There was no hesitation now, only quiet determination. She didn't know why. She didn't know how. But she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't just leave him there. With trembling steps, Aisha walked toward the man in the rain. And in that small, simple moment, everything began to change. The rain kept falling, cold and heavy, as Aisha slowly walked toward the man. Each step felt harder than the last. Her heart beat fast, not just from the cold, but from something deeper, fear, uncertainty, and a strange feeling she couldn't explain. What if he's dangerous? The thought crossed her mind. But when she looked at him again, that fear softened. He didn't look dangerous. He looked broken. Aisha stopped a few steps away from him. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. The sound of rain filled the silence between them. Up close, his condition was even worse than she had imagined. His clothes were torn in places, barely enough to keep him warm. His hands were thin and pale, shaking slightly from the cold. His face carried signs of exhaustion, like someone who hadn't rested properly in days, maybe even longer. And yet, there was something unusual about him. Even in that state, he sat straight. Not proud, but not completely defeated either. His posture held a quiet dignity, like a man who once had everything, but had lost it all. Aisha swallowed gently. She stepped a little closer. "Sir," her voice was soft, almost lost in the rain. The man slowly lifted his head. For the first time, their eyes met. Aisha felt a sudden heaviness in her chest. His eyes were not empty. They were filled with something much deeper, pain, yes, but also wisdom. And something else, something hidden. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Aisha quickly looked away, as if she had seen too much. I saw you sitting here," she said quietly, her voice shaking slightly. "You'll get very sick in this rain." The man didn't reply. He just kept looking at her. Aisha hesitated, then quickly opened her small bag. Her fingers moved through it carefully, as if every item inside mattered more than anything. Because it did. She pulled out a small packet of food, simple, wrapped in paper. It was meant for her dinner. For a second, her hands froze. This was all she had. If she gave it away, she would go hungry tonight. Her grip tightened. The rain grew louder. She closed her eyes for just a moment, then opened them again. Without saying anything, she stepped forward and gently held the packet out toward him. "Please, take this," she said softly. "It's not much, but it's warm." The man looked at the food, then back at her. His expression didn't change much, but something shifted in his eyes. Slowly, almost carefully, he raised his hand and took it. His fingers brushed against hers for a brief second. They were ice cold. Aisha felt a chill run through her. "You should eat it now," she added gently. "It will help a little." Still, he said nothing. But he didn't look away. Aisha glanced at his soaked clothes again. Without thinking too much, she removed her shawl, the only thing protecting her from the cold. For a brief moment, the wind hit her harder, sending a shiver through her body. But she ignored it. "Here," she said, stepping closer again. "Please take this too." She carefully placed the shawl over his shoulders. He didn't resist. He didn't thank her with words. But as the cloth settled around him, something changed in his face. His eyes softened. And for just a second, a faint expression appeared. Not quite a smile. Not quite sadness. Something in between. Something real. Aisha noticed it. And for the first time that night, she felt a small sense of warmth inside her chest. "You'll be okay," she whispered, more to herself than to him. The man slowly lowered his gaze, holding the food in his hands. Then, very quietly, almost like a whisper carried by the rain, "Thank you." The words were soft, but they carried weight. Aisha's breath caught slightly. She nodded, even though he wasn't looking at her anymore. "It's nothing," she said quickly. "Just take care of yourself, sir." She stepped back, pulling her hands close to her body, now exposed to the cold rain. For a moment, she stood there, unsure if she should say anything else. But there was nothing more to say. So she turned and began to walk away. The rain soaked her completely now. Her hair clung to her face, her clothes heavy with water. The cold felt sharper without the shawl. But something inside her felt lighter. She didn't look back. To her, it was just a small act. A simple moment in a long, difficult life. Nothing more. Nothing special. Just something any human should do. But behind her, the man slowly lifted his head again. His eyes followed her as she walked farther into the rain, her small figure fading into the dark street. The faint expression returned to his face. This time, it stayed longer. There was something thoughtful in his gaze now. Something awakened. He held the food tightly in his hands, but he didn't eat it yet. Instead, he kept watching her, as if trying to understand something he had almost forgotten. And as the rain continued to fall, a silent decision began to form in his mind. Something that would change everything. Morning came quietly. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still grey, heavy with clouds that refused to move. The streets were wet, reflecting a dull light that made everything look tired. Inside a small, cramped room, Aisha slowly opened her eyes. For a moment, she didn't move. Her body felt heavy, as if the exhaustion from yesterday had settled deep into her bones. Her clothes from the night before were still slightly damp, hanging near the wall. The cold had followed her home. She turned her head slightly. On the other side of the room, her mother lay on a thin bed, covered with a worn blanket. A soft but painful cough broke the silence. Aisha quickly sat up. "Ammi," she whispered, moving closer. Her mother gave a weak smile, but her face looked pale. "I'm fine," she said softly, though it was clear she wasn't. Aisha's chest tightened. She reached for the small container of medicine nearby, but when she opened it, her heart sank. It was almost empty. Only one dose left. Her fingers trembled slightly as she closed it again. "I'll bring more today," Aisha said, forcing a calm tone into her voice. But deep inside, she didn't know how. She stood up slowly and walked to the corner of the room where she kept her small bag. Opening it, she counted the money again. The same result. Not enough. Not even close. Before she could think further, a loud knock echoed through the room. Her heart jumped. Another knock. Louder this time. Aisha froze for a second, then slowly walked toward the door. She already knew who it was. As soon as she opened it, the landlord stood there, his face hard and impatient. "I've waited long enough," he said sharply. "You promised the rent days ago." Aisha lowered her eyes slightly. "I just need a little more time," she said quietly. "Please, my mother is not well. I will arrange it soon." The landlord shook his head, clearly annoyed. "I don't care about your excuses," he snapped. "If you don't pay in 2 days, you leave." His words hit her like a sudden storm. 2 days. That was all she had. "I understand," she replied softly, even though her voice felt heavy. Without another word, he turned and walked away. Aisha slowly closed the door. For a moment, she leaned against it, her eyes shut tight. It felt like the walls were closing in on her. But she didn't cry. She couldn't afford to. After a few seconds, she straightened herself and turned back toward her mother. "I'll fix everything," she said gently. She didn't know if it was true, but she said it anyway. A short while later, Aisha reached the cafe. The morning rush had already started. Customers filled the small space, voices overlapping, orders being shouted. She quickly tied her apron and got to work. But something felt off. Her boss was watching her more closely than usual. Every small mistake, every delay, he noticed it all. "Aisha, table 3 has been waiting too long," he shouted. "I'm coming," she replied quickly, trying to keep up. Her hands moved fast, but her mind felt slow. The lack of sleep, the stress, the worry, it was all catching up to her. A cup slipped slightly from her hand, spilling a little tea onto the tray. It wasn't much, but it was enough. "That's it," her boss snapped, walking toward her. "I've had enough of this carelessness." "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "It won't happen again." "You always say that," he replied coldly. "If you can't handle the work, then leave. I don't have time for this." Her throat tightened. "I need this job," she said quietly. But he had already turned away. The message was clear. One more mistake, and she was gone. Hours passed slowly. Each second felt heavier than the last. By the time her shift ended, Aisha felt completely drained. As she stepped outside, the cool air hit her face. She closed her eyes for a moment. And then, suddenly, her mind went back to last night. The man, sitting in the rain. Cold. Silent. Alone. Her brows tightened slightly. Did he survive the night? She wondered. The thought stayed with her. She remembered his eyes. There was something about them, something she couldn't forget. For a brief moment, she almost turned toward the street where she had seen him. But then reality pulled her back. She had no time. Too many problems. Too many responsibilities. With a quiet sigh, she adjusted her bag and started walking again. The streets were busy now. People moving fast. Cars passing. Life going on as if nothing ever changed. Aisha walked among them. Invisible. No one noticed her tired eyes. No one saw the weight she carried. No one knew how close she was to losing everything. She was just another face in the crowd. Another person trying to survive. Her grip tightened around her bag. But even then, she kept walking. Because stopping was not an option. As the day moved forward, something strange began to build in the air. A feeling. Quiet. Unseen. As if something was about to happen. But Aisha didn't notice. She was too busy fighting her own battles. Too busy trying to hold her world together. She took a deep breath and stepped forward into another difficult day, completely unaware that her life was about to change in a way she could never imagine. The day moved on like any other. Nothing felt different. Nothing gave a warning. Aisha stood behind the counter at the cafe, quietly wiping a table. Her body felt tired, but her mind was even more exhausted. The landlord's words still echoed in her head. 2 days, or leave. She tried not to think about it. Outside, the street was busy. People passed by, talking, laughing, living their lives. Everything felt normal. Until suddenly, a deep, powerful sound broke through the noise. The loud rumble of engines. Not one. Not two. Many. The sound grew stronger, closer, heavier. Aisha paused. So did everyone else. The noise didn't belong to this small, quiet street. Curiosity pulled people toward the windows. Aisha slowly looked up. And then, she saw them. One black SUV turned the corner. Then another. And another. Until all 7 black SUVs lined up along the narrow street, their dark surfaces shining under the pale daylight. They moved slowly, smoothly, like they owned the road. The entire street seemed to freeze. People stepped aside. Conversations stopped. Even the cafe grew silent. "Who are they?" someone whispered. "Is it the police?" another voice asked. "No, they look too important," someone else said. Aisha felt a strange tension rise inside her chest. Her fingers tightened around the cloth in her hand. The SUVs came to a perfect stop right outside the cafe. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, almost at the same time, the doors opened. Men stepped out, all dressed in clean, dark suits. Their movements were calm, controlled, and precise. Their faces showed no emotion. They didn't look around nervously. They didn't hesitate. They looked like men who knew exactly what they were doing. And that made it even more unsettling. People on the street began whispering louder now. Some stepped back. Others leaned forward, trying to see more. Aisha's heart began to beat faster. Something felt wrong. Or maybe something big. The men spoke quietly to each other. Then one of them, taller than the rest, stepped forward. His eyes scanned the area. Slowly, carefully, until they stopped. On her. Aisha's breath caught. For a second, she looked behind her, thinking maybe he was looking at someone else. But no. His gaze didn't move. He was looking directly at her. Her heart began to race. Why? Why are they looking at me? She thought. Her boss stepped closer, confused and nervous. "Do you know them?" he whispered. Aisha shook her head quickly. "No." Before she could say anything more, the man in the suit began walking toward the cafe. Each step he took felt louder than it should. The room grew quiet again. Even the air felt heavy. Aisha felt her palms grow cold. Her mind started racing with questions. Did I do something wrong? Is this about the cafe? Did someone complain? Or is it something worse? The man stopped just a few steps away from her. For a moment, he said nothing. He simply looked at her. Then, in a calm and respectful voice, he spoke. "Are you Aisha?" Her throat went dry. She nodded slowly. "Yes." The man gave a small, polite nod. "We've been looking for you." Her heart skipped a beat. "Looking for me," she repeated softly. The people around her began whispering again. What did she do? Why would they come for her? Is she in trouble? Each whisper made her feel smaller, more exposed. I don't understand, Aisha said, her voice unsteady. Is something wrong? The man's expression did not change, but his tone remained calm. There is no need to worry, he said. You are not in trouble. That should have made her feel better, but it didn't, because he still hadn't explained anything. Then, why are you here? She asked. The man paused for a brief second, as if choosing his words carefully. Someone would like to meet you, he said. Aisha blinked. Meet me? Yes. Who? But the man did not answer that question. Instead, he gently gestured toward the SUVs outside. "Please come with us." The words were polite, but they carried weight. The kind that didn't feel like a request, even though it sounded like one. Aisha felt her heartbeat in her ears. Go with them. Just like that. Her mind filled with fear. What if this is a mistake? What if something goes wrong? What if I don't come back? She looked around. Her boss avoided her eyes. The people in the cafe stared at her like she had suddenly become someone else. A stranger. Her hands trembled slightly. I can't just leave, she said, her voice barely steady. You may take your time, the man replied calmly. But we are here for you. Something about his tone felt respectful, not forceful, not threatening, just certain. Aisha swallowed hard. Then, for a brief moment, a thought crossed her mind. The man from last night. The homeless man. His eyes. His silence. She didn't know why, but the memory returned suddenly, clearly. Could this be connected? No, it didn't make sense. Or did it? Her heart beat faster. Fear stood on one side. Curiosity on the other. She took a slow breath. Then another. Finally, she made a decision. I'll come, she said quietly. The man nodded, as if he already knew she would. Without another word, he stepped aside, allowing her to walk forward. Every step she took toward the door felt heavier than the last. The outside air felt different now. The street was filled with eyes watching her. Whispers followed her like shadows. She reached the SUV. One of the men opened the door for her. Aisha paused for just a second. Her heart racing. Her mind uncertain. Her future unknown. Then, slowly, she stepped inside. The door closed behind her with a soft but final sound. And as the engine started, Aisha realized there was no turning back now. The SUV moved smoothly through the city. Aisha sat quietly in the back seat, her hands resting tightly in her lap. Her eyes moved from one window to the other, watching the streets pass by. At first, everything looked familiar. Small shops, crowded roads, people rushing from one place to another. But slowly, things began to change. The streets grew wider, cleaner, quieter. The broken buildings disappeared, replaced by tall glass structures and grandhouses hidden behind high walls. Aisha felt her breath slow, then tighten again. Where are they taking me? She wondered. No one in the car spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't comforting either. It felt controlled. After a long drive, the SUV finally slowed down. Then it stopped. Aisha looked outside. Her eyes widened. In front of her stood a massive gate, made of black iron, tall and elegant. Beyond it, she could see a long driveway lined with perfectly trimmed trees. The gate slowly opened. Without a sound, the SUV moved forward. Aisha's heart began to race again. As they drove inside, the world she knew seemed to disappear completely. The house ahead wasn't just big. It was something she had only seen in pictures. A grand mansion. Bright. Beautiful. Untouched by struggle. The car came to a gentle stop. Before she could react, the door beside her opened. One of the men stood there. Please, he said politely. Aisha stepped out slowly. Her feet touched the smooth ground, so clean it almost didn't feel real. She looked around, unsure where to focus. Everything felt too perfect, too far from her world. Why am I here? She whispered under her breath. Another man stepped forward and gently guided her toward the entrance. As she walked inside, the doors opened wide. The moment she entered, she froze. The space was breathtaking. High ceilings, soft lights, clean floors that reflected every step. Everything was quiet, peaceful, not a single sign of struggle. Aisha suddenly became very aware of herself, her simple clothes, her worn shoes, her tired face. She felt out of place, like she didn't belong here. But something unexpected happened. A woman in formal attire approached her with a gentle smile. Welcome, she said kindly. Aisha blinked in surprise. No judgment, no harsh tone, just respect. Please come this way, the woman added. Still confused, Aisha followed. Each step felt unreal. Finally, They reached a large room. The doors opened slowly. "Please go in," the woman said. Aisha hesitated. Her heart pounded loudly in her chest. Then, gathering her courage, she stepped inside. The room was quiet. Large windows allowed soft light to fill the space. And there, standing near the center, was a man. His back was turned. He stood tall, still, calm. Something about him felt familiar, but Aisha couldn't understand why. The man slowly turned around. And in that moment, everything stopped. Aisha's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes widened. "No," she whispered. It was him. The same man from the rain. But not the same. Gone were the torn clothes. Gone was the weakness. Now, he stood in a perfectly tailored suit. Clean. Strong. Confident. His hair was neat. His face calm. But his eyes, they were exactly the same. Deep. Heavy. Unforgettable. Aisha took a small step back, her mind struggling to understand. "You," she said softly. "It's you." The man looked at her quietly. Then, a faint expression appeared on his face. Not quite a smile, but close. "Yes," he said calmly. The same voice. The same softness. Aisha shook her head slightly. "I don't understand. Last night, you were—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Homeless," he completed gently. The word hung in the air. Aisha lowered her gaze, unsure what to say. She hesitated. "I didn't mean." "There is nothing to explain," he said calmly. His tone held no anger, only understanding. A long silence followed. Then, slowly, he began to walk toward her, each step steady, controlled. "I owe you an explanation," he said. Aisha looked up again, still overwhelmed. The man stopped a few steps away. "For a long time," he began, "I lived a life surrounded by people. Wealth, power, respect." His voice was calm, but there was something heavy behind it. Or at least, what looked like respect. He paused. "People smiled at me, spoke kindly, stood by my side." His eyes darkened slightly, but not because they cared. Aisha listened quietly. "They cared about what I had," he continued, "not who I was." The room felt heavier now. Then one day, "I lost trust," he said softly. "Not in money, not in success, but in people." Aisha's chest tightened. "So I made a decision," he continued, "to see the world without all of it. To understand what remains when everything is taken away." Aisha's mind slowly began to connect the pieces. "You chose to live like that?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "Yes." A silence followed. "I sat in the streets, in the cold, in the rain," he said, "and I watched." His voice lowered slightly. "People walked past me. I was invisible. No one stopped." Aisha felt a deep ache in her chest. Then his eyes met hers again. "But you did." The words were simple, but they carried weight. Aisha looked down, her hands trembling slightly. "It was nothing," she said softly. "Anyone would have done it." "No," he replied gently. "They didn't." The truth of his words filled the room. "You had less than most," he continued. "Yet you gave. You had your own struggles, yet you stopped." Aisha's eyes filled slightly, but she held back. "I saw kindness," he said. "Real kindness." Something in his voice changed. Softer. More human. For the first time in a long time. "I felt something I thought I had lost." Aisha looked at him again. "What?" she asked quietly. He paused, then answered. "Faith." The word echoed in the silence. Aisha's breath trembled. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to react. All she could feel was shock, disbelief, and something deeper. Humility. "I didn't know," she whispered. "You weren't supposed to," he replied. Another silence filled the room. This time, heavier, full of meaning. Aisha stood there, her world completely changed. The man stood before her, not as a stranger, but as someone whose life had crossed hers in the most unexpected way. Neither of them spoke. The air between them carried everything that words could not. And in that quiet moment, both of them understood. That one small act had changed everything. The silence in the room felt deep, almost heavy. Aisha stood still, her thoughts racing, her heart still trying to understand everything she had just heard. The man watched her quietly, not with pressure, not with pride, but with calm patience, as if he already knew she needed time. After a few moments, he took a slow breath and spoke again. "There is something I would like to offer you," he said. Aisha looked up. Her chest tightened slightly. An offer. The word itself felt too big, too sudden. "You don't have to be afraid," he added gently. "This is not about repayment." Aisha said nothing, but her eyes searched his face, trying to understand what was coming next. "I have seen many people in my life," he continued. "People with talent, with skills, with ambition." He paused. "But very few with a heart like yours." Aisha's fingers tightened slightly at her sides. She wasn't used to being spoken about this way. "You gave without expecting anything back," he said. "And that matters more than anything money can buy." His voice remained calm, but every word carried weight. "I want to help you," he said simply. Aisha's breath caught. Help. The word echoed in her mind. Images flashed quickly. Her mother, weak and coughing. The empty medicine bottle. The landlord's warning. 2 days. Just 2 days. Her heart pulled toward the idea, but something inside her held back. "What kind of help?" she asked quietly. The man nodded, as if expecting the question. "I can arrange proper medical care for your mother," he said. "The best treatment she needs." Aisha's eyes widened slightly. "And your financial struggles, they can end," he continued. "You will not have to worry about rent or basic needs anymore." Her breath became uneven. It sounded like a dream, something too far from her reality. "There is also a position in my company," he added. "A stable job. Respectable. With growth." The room felt silent again. Too silent. Aisha looked down. Her mind was no longer calm. It was filled with questions, fears, doubts. Why me? Is this real? What if I don't belong there? Her voice came out softer this time. "I don't understand. Why would you do all this for me?" The man's answer came without hesitation. "Because of who you are," he said. "Not what you did. Who you are." The words stayed with her. Aisha swallowed slowly. Her heart pulled in 2 directions. One side whispered, "This is your chance. Take it. Save your mother. Fix everything." The other side warned, "What if this changes you? What if you lose yourself?" She lifted her gaze again. "There must be something you expect from me," she said carefully. The man shook his head. "I expect nothing in return," he replied. "Only that you remain the same person you were that night." Aisha felt something shift inside her. "That's all I value," he added. "Not the act, but the heart behind it." Her eyes softened slightly. For the first time, the offer didn't feel like a trap. But the fear was still there. "I've never been part of a world like this," she admitted quietly. "I don't know how to speak, how to behave. I might fail." Her voice trembled slightly. "I don't belong here." The man listened carefully. Then he spoke, his tone steady and reassuring. "You didn't belong in the rain either," he said. "And yet, you stood there and did what others could not." Aisha froze. His words hit deeper than she expected. "Strength is not about where you come from," he continued. "It's about what you choose to do." The room felt warmer now. Safer. Aisha looked down again. Her thoughts slowed. Her fear didn't disappear, but something stronger began to rise. Hope. She took a deep breath. Then another. Finally, she spoke. "If I accept," she said slowly, "it won't be because I want money." Her voice grew steadier. "It will be because I want to take care of my mother and build a better life." She paused. "And I don't want to change who I am." The man's expression softened. For the first time, a clear, genuine smile appeared. "That is exactly why you deserve this," he said. Aisha felt her eyes grow slightly warm. She quickly looked away, trying to hold her emotions together. For so long, she had been fighting alone. Now, for the first time, someone was standing beside her. Not out of pity, but respect. She lifted her head again. "I accept," she said quietly. The words were simple, but they carried strength. Not greed, not desperation, but hope. The man nodded slowly. "Then this is the beginning," he said. Aisha exhaled softly, as if releasing a weight she had carried for too long. But even as relief touched her heart, a small question remained in the air. What would this new life bring? And would she truly be able to stay the same? The answer was still waiting ahead. Life did not change overnight, but slowly, step by step, it began to shift. At first, everything felt unfamiliar to Aisha. The new job, the new environment, the quiet respect people showed her. Even the simple things, clean clothes, proper meals, a safe place to sleep, felt strange, like they belonged to someone else. But this time, she wasn't afraid. She was careful. Careful not to lose herself. The first change came at home. Her mother was moved to a proper hospital. For the first time in months, doctors treated her with care and urgency. Medicines were given on time. Tests were done. Attention was constant. Aisha stayed by her side as much as she could. Day by day, her mother's condition began to improve. The painful cough softened. Her strength slowly returned. One evening, as her mother sat up without help for the first time, Aisha felt tears fill her eyes. Not tears of sadness, but relief. A quiet victory. The problem of rent disappeared just as quietly. A new, small but comfortable home replaced the old, broken room. The walls were clean. The roof didn't leak. The nights were peaceful. Aisha often stood in the middle of the room, looking around in silence. It still felt unreal. But she reminded herself every day. This was not luck. This was a responsibility. At work, things were different too. Her new role was simple at first. She was guided, trained, and supported. No one shouted at her. No one looked down on her. Instead, they listened, respected her. It wasn't easy. There were moments when she felt out of place, unsure, like she didn't belong. But she didn't give up. She remembered the words. Strength is not about where you come from, but what you choose to do. And so, she kept moving forward. But the most important change was not in her life. It was in her heart. Because Aisha never forgot the rain. She never forgot that night. And she never forgot the man she had helped when she had nothing. One evening, as she was returning home, she saw something familiar. A man sitting by the roadside. Cold. Quiet. Ignored. Just like before. Aisha stopped. For a brief moment, the past and present stood side by side. Then, without hesitation, she walked toward him. This time, her hands were not empty. She offered food, warm clothes, and something even more important, respect. The man looked at her with surprise, just as someone once had. And in that moment, something beautiful began. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Aisha started doing more. Quietly. Without attention. She helped people in small ways, buying meals, arranging shelter, guiding those who had no direction. Then slowly, her efforts grew. She began supporting struggling families, helping children get basic education, providing care for those who had no one. People started noticing. Not because she wanted them to, but because kindness cannot stay hidden forever. Her name began to spread. Not as someone rich, not as someone powerful, but as someone who cared. Someone who understood pain, because she had lived it. And from a distance, someone watched. The man. He never stood beside her in public. He never took credit. But he saw everything. The way she spoke to people. The way she treated them with dignity. The way she gave, without expecting anything back. A quiet pride filled his heart. Not because he had helped her, but because she had remained the same. The same girl, who had stopped in the rain. One evening, Aisha stood near a small group of people she had just helped. Children laughed nearby. A mother wiped tears of relief. The air felt lighter, full of hope. Aisha looked around quietly, then up at the sky. A soft smile appeared on her face, not of achievement, but of purpose. She had not just changed her life, she had found her reason. And even as the world around her continued to move, Aisha stood strong within it, with a new life in her hands, and her old values still alive in her heart. Time moved forward. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. But some moments never fade. They stay, quietly, deep in the heart. One evening, the sky grew heavy again. Dark clouds gathered. The wind picked up. And soon, the rain returned. Not gentle, but strong. Falling fast, just like that night. A busy street filled with people trying to escape the storm. Umbrellas opened. Cars rushed past. Footsteps quickened. Everyone focused on one thing: getting away. Near the corner of that same street, a figure sat on the ground. A young boy. His clothes were wet. His hands wrapped tightly around himself, trying to stay warm. His eyes moved across the crowd, watching, waiting. But no one stopped. A man walked past, shaking his head. A woman avoided looking at him. Two people whispered as they hurried away. The world continued moving. Just like before. A few steps away, another young woman stood under a shop roof. She held a small bag in her hand. Her face showed hesitation. Her eyes fixed on the boy. For a moment, she looked away. Just like everyone else. Her grip tightened. Her mind filled with thoughts. It's not my problem. Someone else will help. I have my own struggles. She took a step forward, ready to leave. But then, she stopped. The rain grew louder, almost as if it was reminding her of something. Slowly, she turned back. Her eyes found the boy again. Cold, alone, forgotten. Something shifted inside her. Something quiet, but powerful. Across the street, standing under the shelter of a building, Aisha watched. Silent, still, her eyes calm, but full of understanding. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She simply watched the moment unfold. Because she had once stood in that same place. She knew the choice. She knew the feeling. The young woman took a deep breath. Then, slowly, she stepped forward. One step, then another, until she stood in front of the boy. She bent down slightly, and held out her hand. Aisha's eyes softened. A faint smile appeared on her face. Not of surprise, but of quiet hope. Somewhere nearby, a man stood at a distance, watching. The same man. His expression calm. His eyes thoughtful. He saw it too. The choice. The moment. The beginning of something unseen. The rain continued to fall. But something had changed. Not in the sky. Not in the world. But in the hearts of people. Because kindness does not end with one act. It travels. From one person to another. From one moment to the next. Like a ripple in water. Growing wider, reaching farther. Touching lives we may never see. Aisha looked up at the sky. The rain touched her face. But this time, it didn't feel cold. Because she had learned something the world often forgets. True wealth is not in money. Not in power. Not in status. It lives in something far greater. Something simple. Something human.